I remember a time, many years ago, when I was standing backstage before one of my first major performances, heart pounding, hands trembling, just a little, wondering if I really belonged there. My thoughts ran wild. Am I ready? Will people see something in me that I can't even see in myself? Maybe you've had moments like that. Moments when the weight of your own worries felt too heavy. It might not be backstage at a theater. Maybe it was walking into a new job, sitting in front of a stack of bills, or stepping into a big life decision. We all know what it is to hesitate and question whether we're equipped for what's coming next. In that moment, however, a soft voice in my heart said, "I'm with you. You're not alone." That voice, I believe, was the voice of God, reminding me that there's a compassion deeper than our fears, a love that surpasses our insecurities, and a grace so expansive that it can carry us through our hidden struggles. When I look at people's faces in the crowd or pass folks on the street, I can't help but wonder how many are carrying these hidden struggles. There's that mother who quietly juggles 3 jobs to put food on the table, never complaining, never letting on how tired she really is. There's the teenager who smiles bravely in the hallways at school but battles anxiety and self-doubt once the bedroom door is shut. There's the businessman who seems to have it all together but is haunted by regrets late at night. Perhaps you know someone like that, or maybe that's your own story. We wear these masks, put on our best front, and carry on. But inside, sometimes we're screaming, "Help me understand. Show me the way." Tonight, I want to tell you that there is a way. Trusting in the depth of God's compassion can release us from the chains of those private battles. That's what I want to explore with you. You might be wondering, why does God's compassion matter so much? I've asked myself that too, especially on days when I wanted immediate solutions and quick answers. But here's what I've discovered over the years. That deep well of compassion is not a magical fix or an instant escape route. Instead, it's a steady current of grace, an anchor that keeps us grounded when storms rage, and a gentle presence that humbles and strengthens us all at once. With God's compassion, we find the courage to face our hidden struggles, to bring them into the light, and to experience transformation. Whether you're a believer or someone who is simply curious, I invite you to stay with me on this journey, because there's something here for everyone: hope, encouragement, and real change. Before I begin, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like you're at the end of your rope? Maybe you've put on a brave face for your loved ones, for your coworkers, or for yourself. Maybe deep inside you're craving peace and purpose, but the pressures of life keep shouting louder. I'm here to say, you are not alone in that feeling. All of us, at some point, wrestle with burdens we think we must keep buried inside. It's in these moments, though, that the gift of God's compassion becomes most powerful. It's like finding a hand outstretched in the darkness when you never expected to see any light. It's an invitation to open your heart, maybe just a little at first, and allow hope to flow in. When I reflect on my own life, I see how, time and time again, God's compassion was a steady presence, even when I was the last person to recognize it. Whether it was confusion about career paths or disappointment in my own shortcomings, that sense of divine love was always lingering, waiting for me to let it in. The reason this matters so much to me, and perhaps to you, is that hidden struggles are those silent battles we try to manage on our own. We think we have to be strong, stoic, or somehow superhuman. Yet, the day we acknowledge that we need something greater than ourselves, we open the door to a compassion that surpasses human limitation. So let's take that leap together. Let's go deep tonight and talk about what it really means to lean into God's compassion, because I believe there's freedom in that. There's healing. There's renewal. I'm not just talking about a notion of faith that feels detached from real-world pressures. I'm talking about the kind of faith that translates into stronger relationships, renewed focus, better decisions, and a clearer sense of purpose. My hope is that after hearing this, you'll leave feeling a little lighter, a little more empowered, and a whole lot more determined to keep going. It's time we stopped letting these hidden struggles dictate our lives and started living in the assurance that we're covered by a love that never gives up on us. When I was a young man, fresh out of college, I battled doubts and insecurities so strong they sometimes threatened to paralyze me. Nobody would have guessed it by looking at me, because on the outside, I projected confidence, ambition, and a sense of direction. But I remember nights when I couldn't fall asleep, replaying every perceived mistake. Maybe you know how that feels. Maybe you've asked yourself if you're on the right path or if you're worthy of the opportunities you've been given. I was there. And I can tell you that trusting the depth of God's compassion, really opening my heart to the idea that I was loved unconditionally, was the key to breaking through that mental and emotional fog. You might ask, so how do we begin? One of the first steps, in my experience, is honesty. We must be honest with ourselves about our hidden struggles, honest with God in our prayers, and honest with at least one other person we trust. There is something powerful about naming our struggles, about speaking them out loud. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, the shadows don't have as much power. And even if the process is uncomfortable, that honesty is necessary for growth. Over the course of my life, I've discovered that when I bring my fears and doubts to God, I'm not met with harsh judgment or condemnation, just an ocean of compassion that gently washes away guilt and shame. Let's talk more about that. I recall a conversation with a friend who was going through a rough time. He'd lost his job and felt like he was failing his family. He told me, "Denzel, I just don't want people to see me like this. They expect me to be strong." And I looked at him and said, "The real strength is in admitting you need help." It wasn't about me giving him perfect solution. It was about directing him to a source of compassion that is bigger than all of us. Because when we cling to pride or fear of judgment, we lose the chance to be rescued by that divine love. So if you're in here tonight, feeling that pressure to keep it together, I want to encourage you. Let go of that burden. You don't have to shoulder your pain alone. Think of young people today, our teenagers and young adults, navigating a world that seems more chaotic than ever. They face pressures from social media, academic demands, peer comparisons, and family expectations. Often, they keep their struggles hidden because they believe no one will understand. But you and I both know that behind every tough exterior or carefree smile, there can be a heart searching for meaning and acceptance. If we, as parents, mentors, or leaders, can demonstrate the power of God's compassion, we offer them an alternative to the relentless pressure for perfection. We can show them that vulnerability is not weakness. It's an open door to a love that will never abandon them. Let's consider our families. Sometimes the biggest challenges lie right behind our front doors. We have parents exhausted by daily demands, children feeling unheard, and spouses drifting apart because life gets so busy. We pray for unity, but we don't always know how to find it. Here's a practical step. Bring God's compassion into your home through consistent empathy, gentle communication, and prayer. When you experience an argument or a tension point, pause and remember that you are all flawed human beings in need of compassion, both from each other and from the Almighty. Instead of reacting in anger, react in curiosity. Help me understand where you're coming. Simple changes like that transform a household. They move us from resentment to reconciliation, from hidden struggles to transparent healing. And that's the beauty of God's compassion. It doesn't just comfort us individually. It reshapes our relationships in ways we never thought possible. Now let me talk about another aspect, how this compassion plays out in our careers and community. Success can be a double-edged sword. You might climb the ladder of achievement, but the higher you go, the more isolated you might feel. Some people think the solution is to mask their vulnerabilities to remain competitive. But I've met enough high achievers in my life to know that the strongest among them are the ones who allow grace to guide their decisions. They admit when they need advice. They lean on faith when the pressure is too great. And they treat those around them with genuine respect and care. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the trophies or applause. It's about how many people you've lifted up, how many hearts you've touched, and how often you've allowed divine compassion to flow through you to someone else. That's a testament to real success. Another critical piece is understanding that our hidden struggles are often spiritual in nature. We might feel shame or regret for choices we've made. We might harbor anger or resentment from past hurt. But God's compassion is a gentle invitation to be set free from those chains. It's a call to forgive ourselves and others, and to rise from the ashes of our mistakes. I've seen people heal from deep betrayals, mend broken relationships, and rediscover their own worth by diving into the fullness of that compassionate love. It's not a quick fix. It's a journey, a daily surrender, and a willingness to let God mold us into better versions of ourselves. You might ask, what does that journey look like day to day? For me, it starts with gratitude. I wake up and thank God for another morning, another chance to be better, to live with purpose. Then I try to spend a few moments in quiet reflection or prayer, acknowledging that I can't do it all on my own. That posture, recognizing my need for grace, helps me face challenges with a calmer spirit. Whenever I feel overwhelmed or anxious, I remind myself, God's got me. There's a depth of compassion I can tap into right now. It's like a spiritual muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. Let's dig deeper into a first key point. Acknowledging that hidden struggles exist is the doorway to healing. We cannot overcome what we do not identify. Sometimes we're so busy performing, producing, or proving ourselves that we miss the signals our heart and soul are sending us. We end up snapping at loved ones, losing sleep, or feeling a persistent ache of unease. If that resonates with you, I'd encourage you to pause. Reflect. Ask yourself, what am I really facing beneath the surface? Why am I so uneasy? That self-awareness is like turning the knob on a door that leads to deeper compassion, both from God and for ourselves. It allows us to invite grace into the parts of our hearts we've been trying to manage alone. I remember talking to a young man who was deeply involved in community projects, but carried a hidden sense of guilt for not spending enough time with his family. On the outside, everyone saw a hero, a philanthropist, a role model. But in his quiet moments, he felt like he was failing as a husband and father. He finally broke down and told me, I just don't feel worthy anymore. When we talked about it, I reminded him that God's compassion doesn't vanish because we're not perfect. It's right there, waiting for us to realize that our worth is not based on our performance. It's based on who we are as beloved children of God. From that starting point, he had the courage to make changes, to allocate time differently, to apologize, and to rebuild the bond with his family. That's the power of recognizing hidden struggles and surrendering them to God's compassionate care. This brings me to a second key point. We need to learn to rely on divine compassion as a source of strength, not merely a safety net. Sometimes we treat God like a last resort, the emergency contact when everything else fails. What if we flip that script and let His compassion be our driving force every single day? Instead of waiting until we're desperate, we could wake up each morning aligning our hearts with the truth that we're loved, forgiven, and equipped. The difference that makes in our mindset, our decisions, and our overall peace is immeasurable. It transforms our hidden struggles from heavy burdens into smaller stepping stones toward growth. We begin to view our challenges as opportunities to see God's compassion in action, rather than reasons to question our own worth. In my own career, there were pivotal moments when the pressure of public expectation felt unbearable. Everywhere I went, there was an assumption that I had life figured out. People would ask me for advice, for direction, for inspiration. Yet, I often felt like I was still searching for direction myself. The revelation that God's compassion is infinite, that I didn't have to earn it, helped me break free from the trap of trying to be perfect. Instead, I could be real. That authenticity not only freed me personally, but it resonated with audiences and peers in ways I never anticipated. The more I allowed that compassion to shape my heart, the more genuine connection I found with others. And isn't that what we truly crave? Connection that goes beyond the surface, that sees us in our fullness and still says, "I believe in you." Another real-world application is in the realm of business and community leadership. When leaders operate from a place of compassion, informed by a higher divine example, they cultivate workplaces and communities that value each person's dignity. Now, does that mean we ignore accountability, deadlines, or results? Absolutely not. But compassion reminds us to see people, not just productivity. A friend of mine who runs a nonprofit told me how she balances high expectations with deep empathy. I expect excellence, but I never forget that each person on my team has a life outside of these walls. That's a principle we can all embrace. Compassion need not weaken our efforts. It can actually fuel greater loyalty, creativity, and collaboration. Because when people feel seen and supported, they tend to rise to the occasion in extraordinary ways. Let's talk about those moments when we doubt whether God even hears us. Perhaps you've been praying for a breakthrough, a financial miracle, physical healing, or reconciliation in a fractured relationship, and it hasn't come in the way or time frame you expected. You might wonder, where's the compassion in that? I'd be lying if I said I have all the answers. But I do know that sometimes God's compassion shows up not as the exact answer we want, but as the sustaining grace that keeps us hopeful until the right door opens. It's the comfort that carries us when we think we can't take another step, the unexpected friend who encourages us at just the right moment, or the quiet strength that helps us persevere even when solutions are delayed. Compassion is not always about erasing our pain instantly. It's about walking with us through the pain until we emerge stronger, wiser, and more grounded in faith. We can also look at how hidden struggles, when touched by God's compassion, become testimonies that inspire others. I've sat across the table from people who thought their failures disqualified them from doing any good in the world. They believed their addictions, their past mistakes, or their silent insecurities placed them at the bottom of the heap. Yet, once they allowed that divine grace to fill their hearts, they found that their darkest chapters could become sources of light for someone else. They became mentors, storytellers, supporters, or teachers because they'd walked the rough roads themselves. This is another layer of compassion. It turns our worst moments into building blocks for someone else's victory. When you realize that, you start to see every struggle as a potential stepping stone in God's bigger plan. I'd like to invite you to reflect on your own journey. What are the hidden struggles you've been carrying? Where do you most need compassion right now? Perhaps it's in forgiving someone who hurt you deeply. Maybe it's in believing that you have a bright future despite multiple setbacks. Or it could be as simple as giving yourself permission to rest, knowing that God's love doesn't require ceaseless strife. Whatever it is, I want you to envision yourself placing that burden in the hands of a Creator whose love is boundless. Imagine the weight lifting off your shoulders. Imagine peace settling into your spirit. And imagine the resilience that grows when you trust that you're not alone. Consider the effect this trust can have on young people watching. If they see you relying on divine compassion rather than your own limited strength, they learn that faith is more than just words. It's a practical source of hope. The next generation is starving for authenticity. They want to see evidence that what we preach is not just lip service. Show them that you can admit your fears, rely on God, and still come out fighting with courage. That speaks volumes. And it plants seeds of faith in their own hearts that might blossom at just the right time. They'll remember your example when they face their own giants down the road. I think of families I've met who went through financial hardships, bankruptcy, foreclosure, overwhelming debt, and managed to stay united because they believed in a bigger plan. They prayed together, cried together, and celebrated small victories along the way. The father confessed that he'd always been too proud to ask for help, but once he humbled himself before God, solutions started appearing. A friend offered a temporary job, a neighbor dropped off groceries, and they found unexpected ways to cut costs. Compassion is not just a warm feeling. It can manifest in very tangible, practical provision. That's another reminder that God's hand is always at work, often through the kindness of others, which itself is an extension of his compassion. That leads us to a third key point. God's compassion invites us to be vessels of that same compassion for others. It's not meant to stop with us. The world is full of people who feel unnoticed, unloved, and unworthy. If we're truly touched by divine grace, we should be overflowing with enough love to reach out to others. That might mean volunteering in your community, mentoring someone younger, or simply offering a listening ear to a friend in crisis. It's easy to say, "I'll pray for you," and then walk away. But true compassion, inspired by a God who sees every detail of our lives, moves us to action. It calls us to be present, to stand in the gap, and to reflect that same unconditional care we've received. Imagine a world where each of us did that regularly. Our communities would be radically different. People struggling in silence would feel safer to speak up, and the lonely would find friendship. That's the ripple effect of compassion. Now let's address a real obstacle: the fear of vulnerability. We often hold back from showing our true selves because we're afraid of judgment, rejection, or misunderstanding. But here's the truth. We can't fully experience God's compassion if we're hiding behind a mask. God sees past our facade anyway, and real transformation only happens when we let him see our weaknesses, doubts, and insecurities. When we do that, we discover a love that doesn't shrink back, that doesn't disqualify us. Instead, it says, "I chose you knowing all this. I have a plan for you, scars and all." And when we see that modeled in divine terms, we're better able to offer it to other people, spouses, children, co-workers, who also crave acceptance despite their imperfections. One example that sticks with me is of a young actress who confided how lonely she felt despite her rising fame. She was performing for audiences that adored her, yet she told me she cried herself to sleep most nights. Why? Because she feared that if she ever shared her real struggles, like stage fright or the pressure to look a certain way, she'd be deemed unfit or ungrateful. I encouraged her to seek God's compassion first. Over time, she found the courage to open up to a mentor about her anxiety. She was met not with scorn but with understanding. That opened the door to therapy, to prayer, and to a new support system. Her career continued to flourish, but more importantly, she found emotional and spiritual relief. That's what happens when we trust that God's compassion is bigger than our shame. People often ask, "Denzel, does trusting in God mean life will be easy?" Absolutely not. It means that when life is not easy, you don't have to bear it alone. It means there's a deeper well you can draw strength from, a compass to guide you when you feel lost, and a shoulder to cry on when your spirit is weary. Life still brings heartbreaks, losses, and disappointments. But the difference is that compassion cushions the blow, helps us learn from the pain, and leads us toward a hope that no earthly circumstance can steal. If you take nothing else from what I'm saying, I hope you take this: you are loved more than you can imagine, and that love is not contingent on your success, your perfection, or your image. It's there because God is good, not because we are. And that's what makes it so liberating. Now, as we near the crux of this message, I invite you to remember that every day is a new chance to trust more deeply. If you've been holding on to hidden struggles, consider the possibility that God's compassion is precisely what you need to face them. Maybe you've tried logic, willpower, or distraction techniques, only to find temporary relief. True release comes when we surrender our burdens to a higher love, a love that sees beyond our limitations and invites us into transformation. I've watched people step into that transformative moment and never look back. It doesn't mean they never struggle again, but it means they now have the tools to keep going. Faith, prayer, community, and an unshakable belief in their work. Those are game changers. Let me also remind you that in business or communal life, when we embrace compassion, we create an environment of trust. Imagine a workplace where employees aren't terrified of making mistakes because they know they'll be guided kindly toward improvement. Imagine a neighborhood where people look out for each other in practical ways, sharing resources, talents, and time. Such unity is possible when we remember that we're all in this human experience together, all reliant on a compassion that transcends our differences. God's compassion is the ultimate leveler. It reminds us that none of us are better or more deserving than anyone else. We all stand on equal ground before a grace that's immeasurable. And what about the times when others let us down or betray our trust? Do we respond in anger or bitterness? Or do we allow God's compassion to help us see them through a lens of empathy? That doesn't mean we become doormats or condone destructive behavior. But it does mean we can choose compassion over retaliation, healing over further harm. I've met individuals who have reconciled with estranged family members after years of silence because they finally understood the power of forgiveness. They recognized that as recipients of divine mercy, they were called to extend it. And in doing so, they found a peace that anger and revenge could never provide. I want to leave you with a practical challenge. Take a step this week, just one step, toward trusting God's compassion more fully. Maybe that step is starting each morning with a simple prayer. God, thank you for loving me. Help me love myself and others the same way. Maybe it's being honest with someone about what you're really going through. Or perhaps it's offering compassion to a person you've been too busy to notice. Each act of trust and kindness draws you closer to that deep, divine love and helps you overcome those hidden struggles that have weighed you down for too long. You might be surprised at how quickly a small step can spiral into a bigger transformation. Because once you taste that compassion, you want to live in it. Now, I want us to gather all these reflections into a clear understanding of what this journey means. We began by acknowledging that hidden struggles exist within all of us. Moments of fear, insecurities, wounds from the past that we so often attempt to carry alone. We saw how God's compassion is the open door that beckons us to release those burdens, to let go of guilt and shame, and to find true rest for our souls. We then explored how that same compassion doesn't just benefit us individually, but can overflow into our families, businesses, and communities, creating environments where people feel seen and supported. Finally, we recognize the significance of stepping into our own vulnerability, letting go of the masks, and allowing God to rewrite our story with a love so vast it can transform our darkest chapters into testimonies of hope. This is the essence of trusting the depth of God's compassion. It's not a fleeting emotion or a temporary bandage. It's a foundational truth that reshapes how we see ourselves, others, and our purpose in this life. It challenges us to be brave enough to admit we need help and humble enough to accept it. It also empowers us to be conduits of that same love to those around us. And what could be more fulfilling than playing a part in lifting others out of their hidden struggle? I urge you now to pause and envision what your life could look like if you truly believed, in every fiber of your being, that you are held by a divine love that never runs out. Would you pursue that dream you've been too afraid to chase? Would you reach out to someone you've been estranged from, extending a branch of peace? Would you finally let yourself heal from past hurts and give yourself permission to succeed without guilt? These aren't hypotheticals. They are real possibilities waiting on the other side of your trust in God's compassion. My prayer for each of you is that you find the courage to move forward with this newfound perspective. Don't wait until tomorrow or next week or next year to decide that your life is worth living without the crippling weight of hidden struggles. Make that choice today. You have the power, backed by an infinite compassion, to rewrite the ending of your story. Remember the words of Scripture that say, His mercies are new every morning. That means your mistakes, your regrets, and your hidden shame don't define you. What defines you is the love you're willing to embrace, and the grace you're bold enough to offer. When you align yourself with that truth, you become unstoppable, not because of your own might, but because you're anchored in a strength that is inexhaustible. So as you stand at this crossroads, ask yourself, am I ready to trust in something bigger than my fears? My sincere hope is that your answer is yes, because when you do, you'll find a freedom that not only benefits you, but touches everyone around you. A freedom that turns quiet desperation into peaceful resolve, transforms anxiety into purposeful action, and replaces shame with a renewed sense of worth. That's the kind of life we were meant to live. Now is the time to rise. Now is the time to believe. Let this moment be your turning point. Step out in faith, whether it's baby steps or giant leaps, and watch how God's compassion meets you. There's a line from an old hymn that says, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Maybe tonight is the night you realize you were never truly lost. You were always seen, always loved, always known. It just took a while to recognize that the compass pointing you home was God's compassion all along. With that realization in your heart, I want you to walk out of here tonight empowered. Hold your head high, not in arrogance, but in humble confidence that no matter how tough life gets, you have an answer for those hidden struggles. You have a wellspring of love that refuses to let you drown. Let your life become a living testimony of what happens when you let that compassion shape your every thought, word, and action. Believe me, people will take notice. They'll see the glow in your eyes, the peace in your manner, and they'll want to know the source. That is your moment to testify to the goodness of a God whose love knows no bounds. As you go forth, remember that this isn't a one-time message or a fleeting emotional high. It's an ongoing invitation, an open doorway into a deeper, richer way of living. I challenge you not to let this inspiration fade the moment you return to your routine. Make it a daily practice, a discipline of the heart. Wake up each morning and speak out loud, God, your compassion is enough for me today. And when you lay your head on the pillow at night, thank Him for carrying you through. Over time, this constant awareness will become second nature. It will guide your interactions, influence your decisions, and soften your perspective toward yourself and others. In closing, I want to leave you with a heartfelt invitation. Embrace the depth of God's compassion and let it help you overcome the hidden struggles that have been weighing you down. Don't settle for a life of silent suffering when there's a powerful love waiting to lift you up. Don't believe the lie that you're beyond hope or help. No one is beyond the reach of God's grace. Let go of the pride that tells you to keep your problems under wraps. Choose honesty, choose vulnerability, choose the path that leads to real, lasting change. We're in this together, bound by our shared humanity and by the possibility of a life transformed through faith. So I send you off with a vision of yourself standing stronger and wiser, not because you've never been wounded, but because you've allowed a compassion greater than your wounds to mend and restore you. May you walk in the knowledge that you're loved beyond measure, carry that love into every corner of your life, and stand as a beacon of hope for those who are still searching. That, my friends, is how we overcome hidden struggles, by trusting the depth of God's compassion and letting that unwavering kindness guide us forward. May God bless you richly, may He keep you, and may His compassion follow you every step of your journey. Now go forth, shine that light, and remember you're never alone. Amen.